My name is Marjorie Kincaid. I am 63 years old. I had spent the better part of Sunday afternoon in the kitchen, pretending it was about the food when it was never really about the food. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans slick with too much butter. Comfort meals that said home even when home had grown complicated. I wanted the smell of garlic and thyme to hide the unease that had followed us for months. Daniel and Melissa were coming at 6. I checked the clock every few minutes as if time would behave differently if I watched it closely. The tablecloth had small blue flowers, the same one from Daniel's childhood birthdays. I hid a faint coffee stain beneath the bread basket, a tiny secret of imperfection. When the doorbell finally rang, the dog barked once, uncertain, before slinking behind my legs. "Hey, Mom," Daniel said, stepping inside with the easy grin he used when he wanted to smooth the air before his wife spoke. Melissa followed her heels, clicking softly on the tile. She carried a bouquet of tulips, yellow ones tied with a ribbon that matched her blouse too perfectly to be accidental. "They're beautiful," I said, taking them. "You shouldn't have." "It's nothing," she replied, her smile small polite. "They had them at the market." I put the flowers in water, grateful for the excuse to turn away. Behind me, Daniel filled 2 glasses with iced tea. Melissa set her purse on the counter, glanced around, and gave the faintest sigh, as if the house itself was a little too old, a little too hers, but not hers. We sat down to dinner. I served the chicken past the potatoes, tried not to notice how Melissa's plate stayed neat and untouched longer than anyone else's. Daniel talked about a project at work, something about restoring a historic building downtown. He spoke quickly, as though keeping the rhythm of conversation might keep the peace. "That sounds like your father," I said. He loved old buildings. "Always said the past should have a heartbeat." Daniel smiled, but Melissa's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "Not everyone wants to live in the past," she murmured. I blinked. "Oh, I didn't mean—" "It's fine," she said, cutting her chicken. "Just saying." The words hung there sharp, but thin, like the edge of a paper cut. Daniel looked down at his plate. The dog whined under the table. I folded my napkin, unfolded it again. "So, Melissa," I tried. "How's work? You were traveling last week, right?" Her shoulders straightened. "It's been busy. We just launched a campaign for a hotel chain." "Long hours. I remember those," I said. "Tom used to stay late, too. I'd keep dinner warm until midnight." "That was a different time," she replied quietly, still not looking up. "People expect more now." Daniel cleared his throat. "The mashed potatoes are really good, Mom." I smiled at him, a thank you for trying, though his tone made it sound like an apology. Halfway through the meal, the front door rattled. Wind, I thought, though the night was calm. It made me realize how still the house had become. No clinking, no talking, just the faint hum of the refrigerator. Melissa reached for her glass, her bracelet glinting in the light. "You know," she said suddenly, "we've been thinking about hosting next time. Maybe something a little simpler." "That would be lovely," I said too quickly. "You should. I could bring dessert." "No need," she said, her smile tightening. "We've got it covered." Something about the finality of her tone made my throat go dry. I nodded, pretending to check the gravy boat, anything to keep my hands busy. Daniel pushed his chair back. "Anyone want more tea?" I shook my head. Melissa didn't answer. The air thickened. I could feel the tension gather like static before a summer storm. Every sound was magnified, the scrape of a fork, the soft drip of condensation from a glass. I caught Melissa looking at me. Her expression unreadable, somewhere between exhaustion and anger. I wanted to ask if something was wrong, but I already knew she'd say no. I focused on my plate. The chicken was cooling, the skin losing its crispness. Across from me, Melissa's hands were rigid on the table edge, her knuckles pale. Daniel started to speak, but she cut him off with a look. It was a small moment, almost invisible, but it shifted the air. The smile I'd been holding on to all evening slipped. For the first time, I realized how afraid I was of saying the wrong thing, how carefully I had been measuring every breath around her. When the meal finally ended, Daniel excused himself to answer a phone call. Melissa and I began clearing plates in silence. The scrape of china against wood sounded like something breaking. I rinsed a dish, turned off the faucet, and said softly, "I'm glad you both came tonight." Melissa didn't answer right away. Her voice when it came was low and tight. I almost didn't. Before I could respond, Daniel returned, phone still in his hand. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Fine," she said. But her hand trembled when she reached for the glass. The sound it made as it touched the table, sharp, sudden, made the dog flinch and scurry away. Daniel's eyes darted between us. Mine lingered on the table, on the small ring of moisture spreading from the glass on the air that seemed to vibrate with something unsaid. Dinner was over, but the night wasn't. Something was about to give. The next morning, I woke early, replaying every moment of that dinner like a movie I couldn't stop watching. The sound of the glass against the table still echoed faintly in my mind. By noon, I had convinced myself it was nothing. Just nerves. Just exhaustion. Families had awkward nights. When Daniel called to say they'd drop by for leftovers, I almost said no. But I didn't want to make it worse by avoiding them. I told him I'd reheat everything. They arrived just after lunch. Melissa's voice carried from the porch before she stepped in. "The smell of chicken again," she said. "You really do love repeating meals, don't you?" I smiled as if I hadn't heard the edge in her tone. "It's comfort food. Besides, it tastes better the next day." Daniel bent to pet the dog, who wagged hesitantly before slinking behind the couch. "You've spoiled him," he said, trying to sound light. "He's family," I said. Melissa set her purse on the counter. "Daniel, you should tell your mom about the kitchen plans." He glanced at her, uncertain. "We were just thinking about remodeling ours." "That's exciting," I said. "What style are you going for?" Melissa gave a small laugh. "Something clean. Simple. Not so cluttered." My eyes drifted to the collection of framed photos on the wall. Daniel, at age 6, covered in sand. Our anniversary dinner before his father passed. "Cluttered," I repeated softly. "I didn't mean your home," she said quickly. "Just in general. I like open spaces." Daniel stepped between us slightly, voice even. "We've been looking at houses near the park, too." "Oh," I asked. "I thought you loved the one you have." "We do," Melissa said. "But sometimes you outgrow places, or people's expectations of them." Daniel's shoulders stiffened. "Melissa, I'm just talking," she said. "It's not a crime." The air thickened again. Every word felt like walking across glass. I tried to find something neutral, something kind. "If you need help packing, I still have your father's old truck. It runs fine." "That's generous," she said. "But we can manage." Her voice wasn't loud, but the coldness in it reached farther than shouting would have. Daniel rubbed his temples, muttering, "Can we please just eat?" Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Hensley, my neighbor from across the street, stood outside holding a small tin of cookies. Her timing was always perfect in the wrong way. "I smelled chicken again," she teased. "You must be feeding an army." Then she noticed Melissa's stiff smile and Daniel's fixed expression. "Oh, did I interrupt something?" "Not at all," I said. "Come in." Melissa stepped back, her posture polite but rigid. "We were just finishing up." Mrs. Hensley didn't move farther inside. "I'll just drop these off then. You all have such lovely family dinners." Daniel forced a smile. "We try." After she left, the silence pressed heavier. Melissa gathered her purse, her bracelets jingling like a warning. "We should go. Daniel has work tomorrow." He didn't argue. I followed them to the door, my hands clasped to keep them steady. "Good night, Mom," Daniel said, voice softer than before. Melissa didn't look back when she added, "Thank you for dinner." The door closed behind them, and the house swallowed their absence whole. The ticking clock sounded louder than it should have each beat, reminding me how fragile peace could be when love started sounding like obligation. It hadn't always been like this. When Daniel first brought Melissa home 3 years ago, I thought she was exactly what he needed: bright, polite, steady. The first time we met, she'd worn a blue dress and carried lemon bars she'd baked herself. She'd called me Mrs. Kincaid, and I'd laughed, told her to call me Marjorie. It had felt like a good beginning. But beginnings are delicate things. You don't notice the cracks until the light hits them just right. The first one appeared a few months after their wedding, when I stopped by their new house with a casserole. Melissa opened the door in leggings, her hair in a bun, the kind of look women wear when they're trying to hold the day together. "Oh," she'd said, surprised. "You didn't tell me you were coming." "I wanted to see the place," I told her, holding up the dish. "And make sure you two are eating something other than takeout." She smiled tightly. "That's sweet. But you don't have to check up on us." "I'm not checking up," I said, setting the casserole on the counter. "I'm helping." That was the first time her eyes flicked away the faintest recoil, as if I'd said something wrong, but she couldn't name it. Later, it was the curtains. Daniel called one Saturday, said they were having trouble finding the right size. I spent an afternoon measuring, sewing, and hanging a set I thought matched the paint perfectly. When Melissa came home and saw them, she didn't speak for a full minute. "They're lovely," she finally said. "But I already ordered some." "Oh, well," I said, laughing to cover my embarrassment. "You can save those for the guest room." Her jaw tightened. "There is no guest room." After that, the invitations grew fewer. I told myself they were busy, but whenever I dropped off soup or cookies, Melissa's smile would freeze the second she saw the bag in my hands. One evening, Daniel called to say she'd gotten a promotion. I drove across town with a bottle of wine and a card. She opened the door. Hair, damp eyes, tired. "Marjorie, it's late. I just wanted to say congratulations." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Thank you. That's kind." Her voice was polite, but her eyes said, "Please leave." I didn't stay long. As I drove home, I told myself she'd come around. That's what I kept saying over and over, until one day I realized I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince anymore. It started with the sound of silverware, just a small clink, the kind you barely notice. Then came the sigh, the one Melissa made when she was done pretending. Dinner had stretched longer than usual. The roast chicken was cold, the conversation colder. Daniel kept glancing at his phone, half listening, nodding at nothing. I'd tried to fill the silence with talk about the garden, the neighbor's new fence, anything that wasn't heavy. Melissa barely touched her food. She pushed green beans around her plate, her wedding band catching the light. "Everything all right, dear?" I asked. "I'm fine," she said, though the words landed sharp. Daniel looked up, sensing the crack in her voice. "Work's been rough," he said quickly. "They've got her running 2 campaigns at once." Melissa gave him a look that could have stopped a clock. "You don't have to speak for me." "I wasn't." "You were," she said, quieter now, but firmer. The air thickened. I reached for my glass, mostly to give my hands something to do. "If you ever need a few days off, you two could come stay here," I offered. "I'd love the company." Melissa's fork stopped midair. "We're fine in our own home." "I just meant I know what you meant," she said, setting the fork down. "You always mean well." Daniel exhaled. "Melissa, come on." "No, let her talk," she said, eyes still on me. "She always does." Her tone wasn't loud, but something in it made the dog retreat to the living room. I felt the first tremor of humiliation, small, but enough to sting. I smiled the way Southern women do when they feel a slap and aren't allowed to flinch. I didn't realize wanting to help was such a crime. Her chair creaked as she leaned forward. "It's not. But sometimes it feels like you're always checking if I'm doing things right. The curtains, the food, the house, everything. That's not fair," Daniel said. But his voice was uncertain. "I don't mean to," I whispered. "I just like to see you happy." Melissa laughed, once brittle as glass. Happy I can't breathe without feeling like I'm failing some invisible test. Melissa Daniel began, but she cut him off. No, she should hear this, she said. Her fingers drummed the table faster now. You drop by without calling. You rearrange things in the kitchen. You tell me how you used to do it with Tom. That's my husband you're talking about, I said. Your father-in-law. I know who he was, she snapped, and I'm not him. I don't need another parent watching everything I do. Daniel stood, hands raised. Okay, enough. Both of you. Please. But she didn't stop. Her face flushed, voice trembling between rage and something else. You think you're helping, but you're not. You're smothering us. I felt heat rise in my chest, the kind that comes when your heart starts breaking in real time. I'm sorry if I've been too present, I said quietly. It's just Daniel's all I have left. And then it happened. Her hand hit the table so hard the salt shaker jumped. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. The plates rattled, water sloshed, and for a moment, I thought even the walls had flinched. Enough, Mom, she shouted. Her voice shook, wild, unfiltered. Get out. No one wants you here. Daniel froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came. The dog whimpered from the hallway. I stared at her, unable to move. The words seemed to hang in the air like smoke that wouldn't fade. I could hear my pulse in my ears, see the edge of the table blur in front of me. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint tick of the clock on the wall and the slow drip of gravy down the side of the serving bowl. Daniel finally whispered, Melissa, what did you just say? Her eyes widened as if she'd only just heard herself, but she didn't take it back. She sat rigid, breathing hard, her face pale and wet at the corners of her eyes. I rose from my chair. My hands trembled against the tablecloth, fingertips brushing the glass she'd knocked over. The tea spread across the fabric, dark and spreading like something bleeding. I looked at my son, but he couldn't meet my eyes, so I stood there between them, between memory and disbelief, while the sound of that single word enough kept ringing long after everything else had gone silent. For a moment, I thought the house itself had stopped breathing. The air hung thick, heavy with the echo of Melissa's voice. My hands stayed frozen above the table, fingers shaking slightly as if the sound had lodged inside my skin. The gravy in the bowl rippled slow circles spreading outward. I watched them instead of looking at her. It was easier than facing what had just been said. Daniel moved first. His chair scraped against the floor. Melissa, he whispered, like saying her name might undo it. She didn't answer. She pressed her napkin flat on the table, knuckles white, breathing uneven. Her chest rose and fell like someone who'd been running. Melissa, he said again, louder this time. Her eyes darted toward him, then toward me. For the first time, she looked uncertain, like she hadn't meant for the words to sound that way, but couldn't find a way to pull them back. I stood slowly, the napkin falling from my lap. My voice came out small. All right. I'll go. Daniel reached toward me, but I stepped away. It's fine, I said. She doesn't want me here. I didn't mean, Melissa started, but her voice cracked. You said it plain enough, I murmured. The room felt smaller by the second. The ticking of the wall clock filled every gap where words should have been. Daniel's face was pale eyes, caught between us like a boy, again watching a storm he didn't know how to stop. Mom, please, he said quietly. Just sit down. Let's calm down. I'm calm, I said, though my throat burned. Too calm, maybe. Melissa pushed her plate away. This isn't what I wanted. You just wanted me gone, I said. She flinched. You twist everything. I twist. I could hear my voice rise, the tremor finally breaking through. I spent months trying not to upset you. I bit my tongue. I stayed quiet. I tried to make you feel welcome. And now you tell me I don't belong in my own home. It's Daniel's house too, she said. The words came out soft but sharp enough to cut. Daniel stepped between us. Stop it, both of you. Neither of us moved. I could feel tears threatening, but they wouldn't come. My body wouldn't let them. Instead, I looked down at the mess on the table. The overturned glass, the tea spreading across the cloth, dripping onto the floor. It looked like a stain that would never come out. I'll clean this up, I said. My voice sounded distant, like someone else's. No, Daniel said. Leave it. He turned to Melissa. What were you thinking? She rubbed her temples. I don't know. I'm tired, Daniel. I'm tired of feeling like I'm being judged in my own house. I never judged you, I said. I only wanted you to feel like part of this family. She looked at me, then really looked. Her face was streaked with tears she hadn't realized were there. And I wanted that too. But every time you came over, I felt smaller. Her honesty hit harder than her anger. I didn't know what to say. Daniel pressed his palms flat on the table, head bowed. We can't keep doing this, he said softly. Something has to give. The sound of his voice, low, exhausted, pulled the last of the fight out of me. I sat back down, my hands resting on the wet tablecloth. The tea soaked through the fabric into my palms, cold against my skin. No one moved for a long time. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't peace. It was something heavier, a silence that felt like the edge of goodbye. Daniel didn't speak right away. He stood at the head of the table, his hand gripping the back of his chair so tightly, his knuckles whitened. Melissa's shoulders were still trembling. I sat frozen, one hand on the edge of the table, as if it could steady me. For a long stretch, no one moved. The house seemed to shrink around us. Then Daniel exhaled, slow, shaky. Melissa, he said quietly. That was too far. She lifted her face, eyes rimmed red. You think I don't know that? You told my mother to get out, he said, his voice low but firm. You don't say that to her. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. His words came sharper now, and she looked away. My throat tightened. I wanted to tell him to stop, to sit down to breathe, but I couldn't make a sound. Melissa pushed her chair back and stood her tone pleading. You have no idea what it's like, Daniel. Every visit feels like an inspection. Every comment about how your dad used to do things, it's like a reminder that I'll never be enough. Daniel rubbed his forehead. That's not what she means when she says those things. How would you know she snapped? You don't notice how she looks at me. You just sit there and let it happen. His face fell. That's not fair. It's the truth, she said. You always take her side. I'm not taking anyone's side, he said. But even as he said it, I saw the guilt flicker behind his eyes. I finally found my voice, soft but steady. He shouldn't have to choose. Melissa turned toward me. That's easy for you to say. You already had your place here. I'm the one who's trying to fit into a story that was written before I arrived. The words struck harder than she knew. I lowered my gaze, my fingers brushing the damp tablecloth. It wasn't meant to make you feel that way, I whispered. I never wanted to replace anyone. Daniel took a step back from both of us, running a hand through his hair. Can we stop talking past each other for 1 minute? But it was too late. The air was thick with everything we'd tried not to say for years. Melissa folded her arms, her voice breaking. Do you know what it's like to walk into a house that never feels like yours? I swallowed the ache in my chest. Do you know what it's like to lose one, then come back and feel like you don't belong in it anymore? Daniel's eyes darted between us, his wife, his mother, like a man watching two sides of himself tearing apart. Finally, he spoke. Both of you stop. His voice cracked mid-word. I can't stand here while you rip each other apart. I love you both. Melissa looked at him, her anger faltering. Then say something that sounds like it. He hesitated, his mouth parting, but no words coming out. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It was loaded, trembling. Then he turned toward me. Our eyes met, and something inside me broke. There was love there, yes, but also a deep, helpless sorrow. He looked like a man caught in a fire that neither woman could put out. "Mom," he said finally, his voice almost a whisper. "Please don't go." It wasn't an order. It wasn't even a plea. It was the sound of a son begging the world not to collapse between the two people he loved most. And standing there watching him, I realized the hardest thing for a mother wasn't being told to leave, it was staying, knowing her presence might be the very thing breaking him apart. Daniel stood there for what felt like forever, his hand still gripping the back of the chair. His face was pale, jaw tight, and I could see the small muscle twitch in his temple, something he used to do as a boy when he was trying not to cry. Melissa was still standing at the far end of the table, one hand flat against the surface, the other clenched at her side. Her chest rose and fell with quick, shallow breaths. The sound of the clock ticking on the wall was the only thing moving the room forward. "Daniel," she said, voice hoarse. "Say something." He didn't. He looked between us, his eyes darting from her to me and back again. I could see the conflict tearing through him, the husband trying to soothe the storm, the son trying not to lose his footing between two worlds that refused to blend. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "You shouldn't have said that." "I didn't mean," Melissa began. "Yes, you did," he said, cutting her off. "You meant every word." "I was angry," she said quickly, as if anger could be an excuse. "You don't understand Daniel." "Don't do that," he said sharply. "Don't turn this into something else." Melissa's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "You're defending her again. You always defend her because she's my mother," he snapped. Then quieter. "Because she doesn't deserve to be treated like this." Melissa took a step back. "And what about me? Do I deserve to be constantly compared to someone who can't let go of the past?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. My name or something close to it trembled in the space between us, but Daniel's voice swallowed mine. "You think she's holding on to the past," he said. "She's been trying to hold this family together." Melissa gave a short, bitter laugh. "By showing up uninvited, by rearranging my kitchen, by telling me how my husband liked things when he was a child." "That's not fair," he said. "Then tell me what is fair," she said, her voice breaking. "Tell me how I'm supposed to live in a house where everything reminds me that I'll never be enough." Daniel stared at her for a long moment, and I could see the exhaustion weighing him down. His shoulders sagged. His fingers twitched at his sides, restless, searching for somewhere to land. Finally, he turned to me. His eyes met mine, and I saw it there, pain, shame, and a kind of helpless love that twisted in my chest. He came around the table, slowly, his steps measured, deliberate. He stopped beside me and placed a hand on my shoulder. I felt it trembling against my sweater. "Mom," he said quietly. I looked up at him, my throat aching from holding back tears. He took a breath, and then his voice came out steady, stronger than before. "If my mother isn't welcome here, then neither am I." The words fell heavy and final. The sound of them seemed to move through the walls, through the air itself, until everything else went silent. Melissa's hand dropped from the table. Her face went blank, all color draining away. "What?" she whispered. Daniel didn't repeat himself. He didn't need to. His hand slid from my shoulder down to my hand, and he held it firm, unshakable, as if to anchor us both. "You don't mean that," Melissa said. "You're angry. You'll regret saying it." "I've regretted staying quiet a lot more," he said. Her tears finally came then, quick and hot. "You're choosing her over me. I'm choosing what's right," he said. "You can't talk to my mother like that and expect me to sit here and pretend it's normal." Melissa shook her head, disbelief spilling into her voice. "You don't see it. You never have. She gets to play the victim, and I'm the villain." "I never said that," Daniel replied. "But you made her cry in her own house." Melissa's voice cracked. "I made her cry." She makes me feel invisible, Daniel. Every single time she walks in, I disappear. His grip on my hand tightened. Maybe that's not her fault. Maybe that's something you've been carrying. She took a step toward him. You're defending her again. I'm standing up for her, he said. There's a difference. I'm your wife, she said, trembling. I'm supposed to come first. He looked at her, his expression softening for the first time. You do, but that doesn't mean she stops being my mother. Melissa turned away, covering her face. Her shoulders shook. I can't do this, she whispered. Daniel's voice softened. Then don't yell. Don't fight. Just sit. Please, but she didn't sit. She pressed her palms against the counter and stared out the window, tears streaking down her cheeks. I wanted to go to her to say something that would mend the jagged edges between us, but my feet felt rooted to the floor. Daniel's hand was still in mine and I couldn't let go. Melissa, he said again, gentler this time. This isn't how it's supposed to be. She turned around, eyes red. No, it's not. But you don't understand what it feels like to live under her shadow. I took a breath and found my voice. It's not a shadow, dear. It's just love, messy and clumsy and maybe too much. But it's all I have left to give. Melissa's lips parted, but no sound came. Daniel's hand trembled once, then steadied. We'll figure it out, he said softly. But not like this. Not if it means losing who we are. Melissa sank into a chair, her face buried in her hands. Daniel looked down at me, his eyes filled with a quiet sadness that felt heavier than anger. I won't let you walk out of here feeling unwanted, he said to me. Not ever. And in that single moment, his voice firm as hand, warm against mine, I understood that the words he'd spoken weren't just about loyalty. They were about survival, about keeping what little of our family was still left standing. Melissa didn't look up, and Daniel didn't move. The room was silent again, but this time it wasn't empty. It pulsed with something raw and fragile truth finally spoken aloud. No one spoke after that. The only movement came from the faint sway of the curtains in the air conditioning, and the shallow rise and fall of our breathing. Daniel's hand was still wrapped around mine, firm but shaking. His thumb moved in small circles over my knuckles, a wordless plea for calm that neither of us could answer. Melissa sat with her face buried in her hands. Her shoulders trembled, once, then went still. The sound of her quiet crying filled the spaces where words no longer fit. I should go, I whispered, though I didn't know where I meant to go. Daniel didn't let go. No, you're not leaving, Daniel, Melissa said softly, her voice muffled. Let her. He turned toward her, his tone tight. Stop telling people to leave. You've done enough of that tonight. Her hands dropped from her face. The red in her eyes was brighter than the light overhead. I didn't mean it, she said. You said it, he interrupted. You don't get to unsay it now. Her lip quivered. I was angry. You never see it from my side. I see both sides, he said. That's the problem. He looked at me then, and I could tell he was unraveling inside, trying to hold together a home that suddenly felt like two halves of a broken plate. I can't stay here and make things worse, I said quietly. It's her house, too. Daniel's hand tightened around mine. You belong here as much as anyone. I don't, I said. Not right now. Melissa's chair scraped as she pushed back and stood. He's right, she said, voice shaking. You belong. You always have. That's the problem. Her words came out brittle, almost lost. Then she sank back down, defeated. I feel like a guest in my own marriage, she said. I wanted to tell her I never meant to make her feel that way, but the words sat heavy in my throat. I thought of all the small things, the unannounced visits, the advice she hadn't asked for the casseroles she didn't want. They lined up in my mind like tiny offenses I'd never meant to commit. Daniel's voice broke through. Melissa, he said softer now. Look at me. She didn't. He reached across the table, but she flinched back. "Please," he said. "I can't fix this if you don't talk to me." Her fingers twisted in her lap. "What do you want me to say? That I'm jealous? That I can't compete with a memory?" He shook his head. "You don't have to compete." "Then why do I always lose?" she asked. Daniel looked away. His grip on my hand loosened, and I pulled it free, setting it gently on the table. "I think I said slowly, we all need a little quiet tonight." Melissa's breath hitched, and Daniel's shoulders fell. For a moment, it was like the whole house sighed, tired of holding its breath. I stood meaning to leave, but Daniel caught my wrist. His touch was gentler this time, almost pleading. "Stay," he said. I hesitated, then sat again, my pulse thudding in my ears. None of us spoke after that. The storm had passed, but its silence filled every corner, thick and alive. Across the table, Melissa wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, her eyes no longer defiant, just empty and scared. Daniel leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're still family," he said. No one answered, but I think in that silence, all three of us wanted to believe him. Melissa's breathing was uneven, the kind that comes when someone's trying too hard not to cry. She sat hunched over elbows on the table, eyes fixed on the glass in front of her as though looking anywhere else might break her completely. Daniel had moved closer to her now. The anger in his voice had faded, replaced by a quiet pleading I hadn't heard since he was a child, asking for something he couldn't name. "Melissa," he said softly, "talk to me." She didn't move. Her fingers tightened around the glass until I thought it might shatter. He tried again. "Please, say something." When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I can't do this anymore." Daniel froze. "Do what?" This she said, gesturing weakly around the room. The pretending. The smiling when I feel like I'm drowning. The trying to prove I deserve a place in this family. Her words sliced through the quiet. I could feel them land somewhere deep inside me. Daniel shook his head. "No one's asking you to prove anything. You don't see it," she said, voice trembling. "You never see it. Every time she visits, I feel like I'm being tested, like she's keeping score of every mistake I make." I opened my mouth, then stopped. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't sound like defense. Daniel reached for her hand, but she pulled it back. "Melissa, that's not fair." "Fair," she said, laughing, once the sound hollow. "You think this is about fair? It's about never being enough. I try to be patient. I try to be kind. But she walks in and suddenly I'm just the woman who isn't her." Her words hit like a slap, but I couldn't even be angry. I just sat there, every small memory, every unsolicited suggestion, every uninvited visit flashing back in painful clarity. Daniel's voice was quiet. "You could have told me." "I tried," she said. "But you always said, 'She means well.'" He lowered his head, shame settling into his posture. "I thought you two just needed time." "Time doesn't fix feeling invisible," she said. The sound of her voice cracked on that last word. It was a small sound, but it broke the last bit of restraint in the room. I stood and reached for the napkin near her plate, my hands trembling as I placed it in front of her. "I never wanted you to feel that way," I said softly. She didn't look up. "You didn't have to want it for it to happen." Her tone wasn't cruel. It was tired. Defeated. Daniel touched her arm, his voice barely a whisper. "Melissa." That was when she started to cry quietly at first, then deeper, the kind of crying that comes from somewhere below language. She pressed her hands to her face, her whole body shaking. Daniel stood behind her and wrapped his arms around her shoulders. "Hey," he said gently. "It's all right." "It's not," she choked out. "I keep trying so hard, Daniel. I go to work, I come home, I hold everything together, and still it's never enough." "It's enough for me," he said. "It always has been." She turned toward him, tears streaking her cheeks. "Then why does it never feel like it?" He didn't answer. He just held her tighter. I sat down again, my legs weak beneath me. The sound of her crying filled the room, and all I could think about was how many times I had stood in that same kitchen, thinking I was helping, never seeing how heavy my love had become. "I'm sorry," I said, the words shaking out of me. "I didn't mean to make you feel small." Melissa's hands dropped slowly from her face. She looked at me, not angry this time, just hollow. "I know you didn't," she said quietly. "But you did." I nodded, unable to look away from her. "I'll do better." Her eyes softened just a little. "I don't want better," she said. "I just want peace." Daniel exhaled, his forehead resting against hers. "Then we start there," he said. No one spoke after that. The only sound left was her breathing slowly, evening out the air between us, thick but gentler now, like the storm had finally remembered how to rain. The silence stretched until it became something almost living. Daniel still had his arms around Melissa, his chin resting lightly on the top of her head. Her sobs had slowed, but her breathing stayed uneven, sharp, shallow, like she was fighting something invisible pressing against her chest. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, frayed around the edges. "You both think I'm angry all the time," she said. "But I'm not angry. I'm scared." Daniel loosened his hold just enough to look at her. "Scared of what?" She wiped at her eyes, shaking her head. "Of everything. Of failing. Of not being enough for you or for me or for anyone." He reached for her hand, but she pulled it away gently. "You don't get it," she whispered. "You go to work. You fix things. You see results. I go to work and I come home feeling like I'm disappearing. Like nothing I do matters. They keep promoting people half as experienced as I am because they're easier to work with. That's what my boss said, easier. You know what that means. It means quiet. It means obedient." I could hear the bitterness in her voice, but underneath it there was something fragile. Daniel's voice softened. "You should have told me." "I tried," she said. "But every time I start, you tell me to calm down, or you say I'm overthinking. I needed you to listen." He looked at her, guilt in his eyes. "I didn't know how bad it was." Melissa gave a tired laugh, then covered her mouth as if to keep it from breaking into another sob. "You didn't see me last month, did you? When I sat in the doctor's office for 40 minutes after you left for that client meeting." Daniel frowned. "What are you talking about?" She hesitated, then looked at both of us. Her eyes wet but steady. "I thought I was pregnant," she said. "I took the test at home. It was positive. I didn't tell you because I wanted to be sure. The doctor said it wasn't viable." "Again." Daniel went pale. "Again." She nodded, her lips trembling. "I didn't want to put you through it another time. I thought if I just kept working, kept smiling, maybe it would stop hurting. But every time your mom mentioned family or the way things used to be, it felt like another reminder that I couldn't give you what you had growing up." The words hit me like a stone in the chest. I didn't know what to say. I'd spent months assuming her distance was pride, not pain. Daniel stepped closer. "Melissa," she turned away. "Don't say you're sorry. I can't hear that right now." "I wasn't going to," he said quietly. "I was going to say I wish I'd been there." Her voice broke. "I didn't want you to see me like that. Crying in a doctor's office surrounded by women holding ultrasound photos. I felt like I didn't belong anywhere." I finally found the courage to speak. "Melissa," I said, my voice shaking. "I didn't know. I never meant to make it worse." She looked at me, then really looked. Her eyes were swollen. Her face streaked with tears. "You couldn't have known. But every time you said how much Daniel loved being a father someday, or how proud Tom would have been to see a grandchild, it felt like a blade turning." I reached across the table, my hand trembling. "I was proud of you before any of that," I said softly. "You've given Daniel a home, and even when things got hard, you stayed. That takes more strength than most people have." She pressed her lips together, trying not to cry again. "You mean that I do," I said. "More than anything." Daniel moved beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We'll get through this," he said. She gave a faint, broken smile. "I don't know how." "Together," he said simply. Melissa nodded, leaning into his chest. I watched as her hands unclenched the tension draining from her shoulders. For the first time that night, her breathing slowed almost peaceful. I sat there in the quiet, realizing how wrong I'd been. Her anger hadn't been cruelty, it was grief with nowhere to go. And beneath all that hurt, I saw a woman who had been trying every single day to hold herself together for everyone but herself. When she finally lifted her head and met my eyes, I didn't see distance anymore. I saw something closer to recognition. Two women, different generations, each afraid of losing what they loved most. And for the first time, I thought maybe love didn't need to be perfect to heal. It just needed to be honest. The words between us faded into silence, leaving only the faint sound of the clock in the corner. Melissa sat across from me, shoulders bowed, her face pale from crying. Daniel stayed close beside her, his arm around her back, but his eyes were fixed on the table, like even he didn't know how to hold the moment together. I wanted to say something comforting, something wise, but every sentence that came to mind felt small compared to what she'd just shared. So instead, I sat there feeling the weight of everything that had been said and everything that still lived unsaid between us. Melissa rubbed her palms over her eyes. "I don't even know why I told you," she whispered. "It doesn't change anything." Daniel shook his head. "It changes everything." She gave a weak laugh. "Maybe for you. For me, it just makes me feel exposed. Like I handed you all the proof that I've failed." "You haven't failed," I said quietly. She looked up at me, then eyes raw, her expression uncertain, half disbelief, half exhaustion. "You think you see me," she said, "but you don't. You see the version of me you wish I could be." Her voice cracked, and something in me broke with it. I leaned forward slowly, my hand trembling as I reached across the table. For a moment, I hesitated, afraid she'd pull back, afraid I'd make it worse. But I let my hand rest on hers anyway, lightly at first, the way you might touch something fragile you've almost destroyed. She didn't move. Her fingers were cold, tense under mine. "I see a woman who's been carrying too much," I said. "Someone trying to hold a world that keeps slipping through her hands. And I see the girl I used to be, the one who thought she had to hold it all alone." Her lips pressed together. I felt her hand start to shake just a little. Then she turned it under mine, her palm meeting my palm. "I wanted to hate you tonight," she said, voice small. "It would have been easier. I know I said, but you didn't." A tear slid down her cheek. I didn't know if it was hers or mine that fell first. Only that the line between us, the invisible one made of years' misunderstanding and pride, finally gave way. Daniel exhaled a quiet sound of relief. His hand brushed the top of Melissa's shoulder. "I think that's enough fighting for one lifetime," he murmured. Melissa gave a shaky laugh that turned into another sob. She wiped her face, quickly embarrassed, but I caught her wrist before she could hide again. "Don't," I said. "You don't have to be strong right now." Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, there wasn't distance or resentment, just something simple, human, and painfully honest. We sat there like that for a long while, our hands joined, our breaths slow and uneven. And when Melissa finally squeezed my fingers, I understood that forgiveness didn't always arrive with words. It arrived in the quiet, between one heartbeat and the next, when love dared to reach across the wreckage and still choose to hold on. The house was still too quiet, the kind of quiet that made even breathing feel loud. Daniel stood behind Melissa's chair, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. I was still holding her hand across the table, afraid that if I let go, the fragile piece might break again. Melissa took a long, uneven breath and tried to smile. "I must look ridiculous," she said, her voice hoarse. Daniel gave a faint laugh. "You look like someone who's been through a war." "I feel like it," she whispered. Her eyes were red, and I wanted to tell her she looked brave instead of broken. But the truth was, we all looked wrecked. There were crumpled napkins, half-empty glasses, the faint mark of spilled tea still drying on the tablecloth. It was the battlefield of an ordinary family evening that had turned into something else entirely. I cleared my throat. "Well," I said softly, "if you're both planning to throw me out again, at least let me take the pie." For a second, there was only silence. Then Daniel snorted. The sound startled him as much as it did me. Melissa blinked confused, then let out a small, choked laugh. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious," I said, trying to keep a straight face. "It's apple with brown sugar. Took me half a day. I refuse to leave it behind as collateral damage." Daniel laughed again, covering his mouth, and Melissa's shoulders began to shake until her tears mixed with laughter. It wasn't graceful laughter. It was messy, too loud, half crying, half release, but it was real. Daniel leaned against the counter, eyes damp, shaking his head. "Only you would talk about pie after that," he said. I shrugged. "Well, I've learned one thing after 63 years, never waste good dessert." Melissa wiped her cheeks, her laughter softening into a sigh. "You're impossible. That's what Tom used to say," I replied. "Usually after I burn dinner." Daniel looked at me with a small smile. "Dad would have loved this chaos." "Only if he didn't have to clean it up," I said, and that made Melissa laugh again quietly. This time, the kind of laugh that comes after the worst storm has passed. When the sound faded, we just sat there for a moment breathing. Something had shifted in the air. Not gone, not forgotten, but lighter. Melissa looked down at the table and then back at me. "I'm sorry," she said, "for all of it." "I shouldn't have said what I did." I squeezed her hand. "You don't need to keep apologizing. Tonight happened because we were all holding our breath for too long." She nodded, eyes glistening again, but this time the tears came softer, cleaner. "You really would have taken the pie, wouldn't you?" I smiled. "I still might." Daniel chuckled and reached for the knife. "Then, let's make sure no one leaves empty-handed." He cut 3 uneven slices, sliding one toward each of us. The crust crumbled, the filling oozed, and the smell of cinnamon filled the air. We ate in silence, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was full, like a song that didn't need words. When Melissa finally looked up, her smile was small, but sure. "You're staying for coffee," she said, not as a question, but as something decided. And for the first time that night, I felt like staying. I woke before sunrise, the house still and heavy, with the kind of quiet that follows too much emotion. The faint smell of cinnamon lingered from the pie, a small trace of the night before. For a moment, I just sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded, listening to the distant hum of Charleston waking up. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Melissa. "Thank you for staying." Just 4 words, but they carried more weight than any apology could. I stared at them for a long time before typing back. "I'm glad I did." I didn't press send right away. I thought of her voice trembling as she spoke, the way Daniel had looked at both of us, half broken, half relieved. The memory of that laughter, fragile but real, flickered through my mind like a candle flame that had finally found air. When I finally sent the message, I slipped on my coat and walked outside. The morning air was cool and soft, the streets damp from the night tide. I walked toward the harbor, the same path Tom and I used to take on quiet Sundays when Daniel was small. Back then, Tom would hold my hand and talk about patience like it was a kind of faith. "You can't fix everything, Marjorie," he'd say. "Sometimes love means waiting for the storm to wear itself out." The water shimmered under the first light. Boats rocked gently, chains clinking against the docks. I leaned on the railing, breathing in the salt and the quiet. Patience. I hadn't thought of it in years. Maybe that was what last night had been about. Not forgiveness, not blame, but waiting long enough for love to find its way through the noise. The sun was just starting to rise when my phone buzzed again. This time it was Daniel. "She's making breakfast. She wants to try again." I smiled, the kind that comes from deep relief, and tucked the phone into my pocket. The harbor wind brushed against my face, carrying the faint sound of gulls and church bells. I whispered a quiet thanks to Tom, to the morning, to whatever grace had decided to let our family have one more chance. Then I turned toward home, ready to walk back into it. A week later, the house smelled like rosemary and roasted chicken again. Same Sunday, same table, but everything felt different. Daniel had put on his favorite record, something soft and old-fashioned, the kind Tom used to play on long afternoons. I was basting the chicken when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, half expecting Daniel, but it was Melissa. She lingered by the doorway holding her phone like she wasn't sure what to do with her hands. "Smells good," she said. Her voice was gentle, unsure. "Old recipe," I replied. "Tom's favorite." She nodded and took a slow breath. "Can I help?" For a moment, I wasn't sure I'd heard her right. I glanced at her. Her hair tied back, sleeves rolled up. She looked like someone ready to stay, not someone preparing to leave. I could handle the salad, she added almost nervously. "Of course," I said. "Knives are in the drawer by the sink." She smiled, faintly, relief flickering in her eyes. "I remember. I just never wanted to touch anything without asking." I paused at the stove. "You don't have to ask anymore." For a few quiet minutes we worked side by side, the rhythm of chopping and stirring filling the silence. The clatter of utensils sounded different now, softer, no tension hiding behind it. Melissa spoke first. "I've been thinking about last week," she said. "About how I talked to you." I set the spoon down. "You don't owe me, I do," she interrupted gently. "You didn't deserve that. None of it." I looked at her and the words caught in my throat. She kept her gaze on the cutting board, slicing carefully. "I was angry at myself. Not you," she said. "It just came out wrong. I wanted so badly to be perfect that I started resenting anyone who reminded me I wasn't." I took a slow breath. I wasn't easy either. I didn't know when to stop helping. That made her laugh softly. "You really don't." "Bad habit," I said. "Comes with motherhood." She looked up then, and her smile reached her eyes this time. "I think I get that now." Daniel walked in with 3 plates in his hands, grinning. "Well, this looks dangerously peaceful." Melissa nudged him with her elbow. "Don't ruin it." He kissed her temple before setting the plates down. Not a chance. The table filled again, 3 people, 1 meal, and a space that finally felt like home. As Melissa carried the salad bowl over, our fingers brushed when she handed me the serving spoon. "Careful," she said lightly. "That dressing might be too sweet." I smiled. "Sweet's not the worst thing." She met my eyes, a trace of emotion crossing her face. "No, it's not." The record played softly behind us, the chicken sizzled in the oven, and when Daniel raised his glass, I felt something shift quietly back into place. For the first time in a long time, Sunday didn't feel like a reminder of what we'd lost. It felt like something we might actually get to keep. Dinner was quieter than usual, but not the uneasy kind of quiet. It was the kind that let you hear the small things, the clink of forks, the soft rhythm of breathing, the occasional scrape of a chair. The house felt lived in again. Daniel reached for the last piece of chicken, then stopped halfway. "You know, he said, his tone lighter than it had been in weeks. I think we need a new tradition." Melissa arched an eyebrow. "Please don't say board games. I still haven't forgiven you for Monopoly night." He grinned. "No, not that. Something simpler." I smiled at him, curious. "What are you thinking?" He leaned back in his chair. "Every Sunday before we finish dinner, we each say one thing we're grateful for." Melissa groaned playfully. "That sounds like something from a self-help podcast." He shrugged. "Maybe. But after the week we've had, I think we could use it." I laughed softly. "You might be onto something, son." Melissa rolled her eyes, but I could see the corner of her mouth twitching. "Fine," she said. "But you go first." Daniel cleared his throat dramatically. "I'm grateful this meal didn't end in shouting or broken silverware. That made both of us laugh, the kind of laugh that releases what's been bottled up for too long. "All right," I said, still smiling. "I'll go next." I set my fork down and looked between them. I'm grateful for forgiveness, especially the kind that takes more than one try. Daniel nodded softly, eyes flicking toward Melissa. "That's a good one." Melissa hesitated. She picked at the edge of her napkin, then looked down at her plate. "Do I have to say it out loud?" "Yes," Daniel said, teasing gently. "That's the rule." She sighed, but there was a faint smile hiding behind it. "Okay." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I'm grateful for second chances." The words hung there for a moment, simple, but they filled the whole room. I felt my throat tighten as I watched her. Daniel reached for her hand, squeezing it once. "That's my favorite answer yet." Melissa gave him a soft smile, her fingers curling around his. "Don't get used to it," she said, trying to sound light, but her voice trembled just enough for me to hear what was underneath. I took a slow breath and lifted my glass. Then, "Here's to second chances," I said. "And to people brave enough to take them." Melissa met my gaze, eyes shining. She raised her own glass. "And to the ones who make them possible." The glasses touched gently. The sound was small, but it felt like something solid, something earned. As we finished dinner, Daniel leaned back and said, "I think this gratitude game might stick." I smiled at him, then at her. "So do I." And for the first time in a long while, gratitude didn't feel like a list to be spoken. It felt like love finding its way home. The table was the same wooden surface that once rattled under Melissa's hand, the same one that had soaked up spilled tea and bitter words. But tonight, it looked different. Not because of the candles or the new tablecloth, but because the silence around it had changed. Daniel was telling a story from work, something about a client who brought a cat to a meeting. His hands moved as he spoke, and Melissa laughed in that surprised, honest way that came from her chest, not her throat. I caught myself smiling without meaning to. "You two sound like the old days," I said. Melissa turned to me. "Maybe the old days just needed time to catch up." Daniel grinned. "You mean we're finally normal again?" "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," she said, nudging him lightly with her elbow. The small banter filled the air like music. No edge, no hesitation, just warmth. I reached for the serving spoon and paused, tracing the faint mark left by the salt shaker from that night. The wood had darkened there, a permanent reminder of where everything cracked open. Melissa noticed. "We should sand that out," she said softly. "No," I said. "Let it stay. It's part of the story now." She looked at me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Then we'll just keep setting the plates around it." Daniel raised his glass. "To the table," he said, smiling. "To the table," I echoed. Melissa hesitated before lifting hers. "And to learning how to sit at it without armor." Our glasses met with a quiet clink. Dinner went on, the conversation drifting from work to neighbors to a recipe gone wrong last week. I listened more than I spoke, letting the sound of their voices fill the corners that had once felt hollow. Melissa reached for the breadbasket, laughing as Daniel made a joke about her official promotion to head chef. Her laughter lingered, bright and alive. I looked at her, this woman who'd once been my adversary, now sitting across from me in easy peace, and something inside me settled. The same table that once held anger now held grace. Not perfect, not polished, but real. And as I watched them lean together, sharing small smiles and unspoken gratitude, I knew the cracks in that wood had become part of our foundation, not our breaking. Charleston was quiet that night, the kind of quiet that sits gentle over the water, heavy with salt and memory. The house smelled faintly of rosemary and soap. Daniel and Melissa had left an hour ago, their laughter still echoing faintly in my ears as I washed the last of the dishes. When the sink was empty, I dried my hands and walked to the porch. The air was cool, the kind that carried both the hush of night and the promise of morning. I stood there for a moment, listening to the crickets and the soft hum of a boat engine somewhere down the harbor. The porch light switch was warm under my fingers. For years, that light had been something between a ritual and a prayer. I used to turn it on every night after Tom passed, just in case Daniel stopped by. Later, I kept it burning for Melissa too, though I never admitted that out loud. Tonight, I turned it on again, but not to wait, just to keep something kind alive. Inside my journal waited on the table by the window. I sat down, opened to a fresh page, and let the pen rest in my hand for a while before writing. Love isn't quiet because it's weak, I wrote. It's quiet because it's learned. The words came easily this time. No trembling, no revisions. Just truth. A soft knock startled me. When I opened the door, Melissa stood there, her hair loose around her face, eyes tired but bright. "I forgot my scarf," she said, holding up her hands. "I think I left it on the chair," I smiled. "Come in. It's chilly out." She stepped inside, glancing around. The scarf was right where she'd left it. She picked it up, but didn't move toward the door right away. "The light's still on," she said. "It usually is," I replied. "Old habits." She looked at me then, at the lamp glowing softly through the window. "It feels safe," she said quietly, like a promise that someone's still awake. I felt my throat tighten. "That's what it's for." Melissa nodded, wrapping the scarf around her neck. "Thank you," she said. "Not just for the scarf, not just for the light." When she left, I stood by the window and watched her car pull away, the headlights fading into the dark. The porch light stayed on golden against the night air, steady and sure. I sat back at the table and read the words I'd written one more time. Then beneath them I added, "When they no longer need your light to find their way, keep it burning anyway." Sometimes it's not a signal. It's a reminder that love stayed. I closed the journal, leaned back and listened to the soft hum of the night outside. The light shone through the glass, quiet, but certain. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was waiting for anyone. I was already home.